True Crime Rocket Science. This is a review of day 8 of the Patrick Frazee murder trial. I think it was the weakest day thus far for the prosecution, and as a result this will be quite a short episode. I must also apologize for it being pretty late. I prefer to get these episodes out at least on the night of the court day, and obviously this one has come out the next morning, so apologies for that. I think one of the reasons for the delay was the Dr. Oz interview with Letters from Christopher author Sherilyn Cadle. I wrote a blog post about that. I've also just been studying quite a lot of different information, some in terms of psychology, some in terms of other things, and so I've just sort of been juggling a lot of information, and I've certainly followed the Patrick Frazee trial and day 8, but day 8, as I say, was really underwhelming. In this review we're really going to just breeze over, kind of gloss over trial day 8, and then we're going to address sort of quite an important question, which is the trial is drawing to a close. That was acknowledged by the prosecutor, the judge, and the defense. Interestingly, the case is likely to be sort of finalized by the trial is likely to be finalized by Friday, which means the defense really has one day left, Thursday, to make their case, and looks like they're only going to call one witness, and so we're going to speculate briefly at the end of this episode on who is going to be called, and also on whether Patrick Frazee will testify and whether he should testify. Before we get to that, please subscribe, like, share through your networks, leave a comment, click the bell, and let's try and get this channel to 6,000 subscribers. I was actually hoping to get to 20,000 by the end of November, but I think I'll be happy and I'll be lucky if I get to 7,500. It's not that my videos aren't being watched, they are, it's just that the subscribers are quite slow to subscribe, which is a little bit disappointing for me, but let's crack on. Okay, and so the first tweets of the day from the reporters had to do with the court, sort of the judge basically saying they're very far ahead of schedule, and he's optimistic that the closings will happen on Friday. Now I must admit, when I started covering this trial, I was under the impression it would be 3 weeks long, and then it was suddenly just going so rapidly that I thought, wow, the prosecution making room for the defense case, what's sort of going on, and then that perception sort of changed to, is the first week, does the first week of the trial include those days of jury selection? Is that the first week, and then they're going to be another 2 weeks, and then the 2 weeks was minus the Veterans Day holiday. And there were a couple of days where the trial days sort of were adjourned early or started late. Remember the day where Frazee was ill, and so was Crystal Kenny. But yeah, it looks like the trial, even though it was scheduled for 3 weeks, it looks like it's going to be completed in 2. What's also been interesting is you really have a situation here where the cards, the onus, the burden is all on the prosecution to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the defense, Patrick Frazee, seems to feel that he doesn't really need to do anything except sort of sit back and point out the odd sort of aspect of uncertainty here and there, and that's all he needs to do. In other words, the defense don't really need to account for anything. They don't need to say anything. They don't need to address anything. They just need to rest on their laurels, and what they do have on their side is there's no dead body, there's no absolute confirmation that Kelsey's come to harm, and there's no, according to them anyway, there's no absolute connection of Frazee to what happened to Kelsey. I don't agree with that, but there is certainly an element of doubt. Whether that's reasonable or not is another story altogether. Now, the reason I say trial day 8 was the weakest day for the prosecution is because what really emerged on day 8 was the fact that pretty much all the forensic evidence couldn't really be related to Kelsey. So some of the most compelling evidence turned out to be also some of the weakest evidence. I'll give an example. The tooth fragments that were found, and I'm assuming they were both found at the burn pit. One certainly was, but I think there was a smaller one as well. I'm not sure where that one was found. I'm assuming it was also at the burn pit. That was related to a human being by an anthropologist, and it was also related to a female human being, and that was as close as they could get. No DNA, no fibers, no blood traces, no clothing could be, and no sort of personal possessions could be linked to Kelsey definitively, in terms of that this is her body, or even that a human body had died there, and so it shows you just how effectively, if it was Kelsey, her body has been destroyed beyond all recognition. There's virtually nothing left of her. Now, it does seem as if true crime has come quite a long way since the days of Casey Anthony. With Casey Anthony, her daughter disappeared for 31 days. There was the smell of death in her car, but then law enforcement continued to believe beyond belief that Kaylee was alive somewhere, and around about 6 months went by until December, where they actually found the skeletonized remains of Kaylee Anthony. And how true crime seems to have changed is we're now a little bit further along, where you don't necessarily need absolute human remains. If you've got some reasonable probable cause to suspect that someone has died, that does count for something. Of course, you have the McCann case, where there's been absolutely no proof of someone having been gone for 12 years, and yet the media, the parents, and a lot of their supporters insist that there's hope and that she's still out there somewhere, right? Basically just debunking the whole cadaver dog thing. In the same way, you've got that same ruse going on in the Patrick Frazee case, which is that although there's quite a lot of circumstantial evidence, there's kind of quite a elaborate mosaic reinforcing the notion that something bad has happened to Kelsey. The defense are basically saying, you know what, there's no absolute proof, so we're going to kind of imagine, we're going to kind of live in our fairy tale, our legal fairy tale, that she's still out there somewhere. And so one wonders if you sort of could put a microphone to their faces, whether you could sort of get some kind of version out of them. Is there a version that Kelsey has died, but Frazee has got nothing to do with it, or is there a version that Kelsey's out there somewhere, she's just remaining silent? You know, there's a trial going on, and she's sort of watching from afar and sort of giggling, and maybe she's on an island, maybe she doesn't know, maybe she's sort of gone to the Amazon, and maybe a plane crashed in the Amazon, maybe she's got amnesia. You know, what's their version? And that's sort of where you go into the realms of absurdity and craziness. And there's an area where there's reasonable doubt, and then there's the area of sort of mindfuckery. And it looks like the defense have elected not to try to do that to the jury, and just pretend, in my view, to be very confident of their case. And so that brings us back to the question of whether Frazee will take the stand. I'm not really going to touch on the testimony so much of this day. There was a little bit of testimony from Kelsey's co-workers, and questions about, you know, medical benefits, which are quite significant. I'm going to deal with that in the book I'm writing. I'm not going to deal with that here. And then there was also, I think, a reference to another ex-girlfriend. I know she was covered quite extensively in the documentary on Kelsey, the previous girlfriend who she's currently incarcerated with drug-related charges, but she sort of attested to certain things. I'm also not going to really address that here. What I do want to address is, firstly, the journalists covering this case. I see Elise Schmelzer is participating in a documentary on Chris Watts that's coming out on is it Oxygen, but where she interviewed people from CBI. It's really good to see the same journalists covering sort of cases in depth and just developing expertise. Not just her, but others as well, just doing a really good job. If I compare the coverage of these American journalists to those I've known in South Africa, just the style of reporting, I think, is different. South African journalists aren't dumb, but their coverage of true crime is pretty low. The standard is pretty low. What's also very disappointing, and it may be a question of resources, is, at the end of each court day you get incredibly well written articles, in depth, detailed, meticulous, long form from not just one source but multiple sources, and they're not sort of shoveling from another source. They're there firsthand. They're getting the information, and some of the reporting is somewhat distinctive from others. In South Africa, you'll get often just a day's report of a case. Might just be a collection of tweets. That's all it is, and not a lot. There's no sort of analysis. There's no detail. There's no color, whatever. I don't know. I just find it very bland and very weak. Some of the tweeting from South African journalists tends to be better, but it's almost as if they're told to keep it simple and to keep it sort of very sort of cardboard. Don't go into too much. Don't think about it. Don't interpret it to some extent. So yeah, it's quite impressive to see that. On this day you had a couple of journalists talking about, will Frazee take the stand, and I think he won't. I think the fact that he's kept such a studied silence, not only him but his mother as well. I think that is very good. He's taken very good legal advice. It's also quite a mismatch, his silence in court with the trial going on and the police investigation, and the very noisy chatter and contaminating of the community prior to the crime, chattering to everyone, bad-mouthing Kelsey and all that kind of thing. It's quite an interesting mismatch. So it'll be interesting to see whether he will, to be honest, if, this is my opinion, if Frazee doesn't take the stand and doesn't sort of provide a very convincing account, I think he is going to face a very grim outcome. So I think he's damned if he doesn't do that. On the other hand, if he does take the stand, I think he will be ripped to pieces. So I think he's damned if he doesn't take the stand, and he's damned if he does. At least if he does, he's giving himself a chance. I think the court narrative as it stands now is very compelling. It's not a slam dunk, but it's pretty close to one. It's very a strong case, I think, by the prosecution. It's not without holes or flaws, but it's certainly the mosaic is pretty well done. Having said that, day 8 was pretty weak, and there are definitely those flaws. Another strong aspect for the defense is the weakness of the star witness, who's, I don't think she's liked by the jury. I don't think she's really well liked by the public, and I don't know how much she's trusted. And if the jury can be convinced that she should be trusted even less, and who better to do that than Frazee himself, that could score definitely a few points for him. I don't think he's going to testify. I think who is going to testify, and again, this is just a gut feel. It's just a hunch, is that it's going to be his mother. She's always been in his corner. She's been in his corner all along. Like him, she's also not said anything. She was also very close to being charged, it seemed. I mean, she was detained. She was detained when he was detained. I think she was arrested when he was arrested at the same time, the same location. And she's very close to him, and they live together, and she may even have witnessed the fire burning on the road, so she could even sort of testify that what he was burning was rubbish or trash, and that she'd asked him to. So she could significantly shift the narrative, but one could also see how a mother would testify kind of no matter what, and would say things no matter what, and so one could counter argue that would this really be reliable testimony as well. So would certainly raise a couple of questions. The big question is, if there is a defense witness, how long will this person testify? And the answer is probably something along the lines of half a morning, and then cross-examined also half a morning, and then closing statements. What's also sort of interesting is, the speed of this trial. If I compare it to a trial I sat in South Africa, where the prosecution went on literally for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then the defense went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then when you had closing statements, the trial was adjourned so that there could be preparation for them. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen here. I could be wrong, but the pace is pretty incredible. It's almost like the judiciary want the case sort of out there, and then sort of to slip away in super quick time. They just do not want the media to be chattering about true crime for too long. It's quite interesting. So yeah, also bear in mind, because of the kind of injunctions against the media, lawyers can't be photographed anywhere on the premises of the court. Frazee himself, we haven't seen any photographs of him while he's been on trial. Personally, I think it's shocking. I think in this day and age that you want to impose these kind of constraints. I don't really care that the court building is whatever size it is, but to impose these kind of constraints, I think really favors the defense, and I think it favors this whole psychology of someone committing a crime and thinking that they can get away with it. They can get away with being scrutinized, they can get away with being analyzed, they can get away with keeping their secrets. And it's not just the perpetrator, it's also the little ecosystem of people colluding with them, and that's something that this trial needed to sort of expose, is the little almost like leprechaun figures, these sort of little fairies that have been fluttering about the rural countryside around Cripple Creek and around Florissant, who have been in Frazee's corner and arguably gave him the confidence to get away with this crime, that he had these people in his pocket, and a trial needs to show not only that justice is done, it needs to be shown to be done, needs to be transparent, and so that lack is disappointing. Having said that, we need to respect the process as well while we observing it, and we also need to await the verdict. When the verdict comes out, we can also see whether the system has worked and whether it's been effective. And obviously there have been interests to bear in mind. There have been plea deals, and there have been those sort of agreements, and remains to be seen whether they have sort of paid off and whether the trial has delivered on its mandate. In any event, that's the end of trial day 8. As you've seen, it's just been a really brief gloss over. I'm sure 9 and 10 will be a lot more detailed, but thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do. If you're interested in the Frazee case but you not familiar with my coverage of the Watts case, please listen to a couple of those videos. I'm sure you'll find them interesting. There is a lot of intertextuality between the two cases, and also quite a lot of differences between Chris Watts and Frazee. And by looking at the one, we get to know the other, and by looking at the other, we get to know how the one is not the same, and that's quite important. In any event, I will see you again on trial day 9. Thank you for listening.
Losing time, I'm fading fast. I just wanna make it last. Try to let go of the past. I close my eyes, embrace the blast. Sleepless nights and headaches stack. Restlessness to hell and back. What's my purpose? What do I grab? A slippery surface, a heart attack. And sometimes you just gotta believe there's something that'll give you relief. There's something that'll have what you need. What you need. We're broken, it's tragic. We're not all elastic, but maybe